welcome everyone. My name is Roberto Penga. I'm an Assistant Director of Admissions here at Harvey Mudd College. Really excited to talk to you a little bit about the Claremont Colleges, present to you who we are, and then talk about what you're here for, right, behind the curtain, and learn a little bit more about the admissions process and what you should be doing to prepare. Don, if you can move on to the next slide. So before we get started with this event, I think it's important for the Claremont Colleges to acknowledge the land that it's built on, right? So we are settled upon ancestral lands of indigenous nations, including the Gabrielino, Serrano, and Tangwa peoples. These tribes continue to call this land home, despite attempts of erasure from colonizers, both past and present. Today, we work to honor both their presences and legacy through Pomona's Draper Center for Community Engagement, the Humanities Studio, and the Benton Museum of Art, Scripps Native American and Indigenous Studies minor, Harvey Mudd's coursework with Professor Alfred Flores, and Pitzer's Native Initiatives. We will continue to support these partnerships and amplify Gabrielino, Serrano, and Tangba voices as we look towards the future. Next slide, please. So before we get started, right, I do want to go over a quick program agenda and talk to you a little bit more about what we're going to review today. Keep in mind, this is a very brief snippet of who we are, right? So we will be overviewing the Claremont Colleges. Please, if you're interested in learning more in depth, we each have our individual websites. We also have a Claremont Colleges Receptions YouTube page that has all 5 of us explaining our colleges and everything about the admission process. Again, we'll talk to you about what we have in common, the individual college review, and then what many of you are here for, behind the curtain, right? Looking ahead and what you should expect. Next slide, please, Juan. So one of the things about the Claremont Colleges is we are a consortium of colleges that is located in Claremont, California, about an hour away from Los Angeles. So we're within 1 square mile exist these 5 colleges that coexist with each other. You can see this small map on my right side, and Pomona, Pitzer, Scripps, Claremont McKenna, and Harvey Mudd College are here together. In total, there's 6,000 students at the 5 colleges, 2,500 courses that you can have access to as a undergraduate student here. There's a ton of professors that you have access to, tons of dining halls as well. And if you could shift over to the next slide for me, Don. And so essentially what we're trying to get together is, there's a reason we were intentionally built this way. And these are some of the things that we have in common, right? We're all very collaborative universities, liberal arts and academic environments. We're strictly undergraduate, all of us. Student to faculty ratio tends to be 10-to-1 for all of us as well. The average class size is for us about 18 students per class. Tons of opportunities for research and internships throughout the 5 colleges. You have access to the arts and humanities, natural sciences, social sciences, and interdisciplinary fields. Study abroad opportunities as well, right? We house a study abroad office for students to go anywhere in the world. That's changed a little bit now given the circumstances, but we're hoping that will come back to normal in the near future. And then we are Division 3. The 5 teams, we're actually split into 2 separate teams. Pomona, Pitzer are one team, Harvey Mudd College, Scripps, and Claremont McKenna are a separate team, and we both compete in Division 3 varsity athletics. And with that being said, I do want to push it over to my colleague, Carolyn, so she can talk to you briefly about Pomona College and how wonderful they are.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carolyn Starks. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm so stoked to tell you a little bit about Pomona. So Pomona is the oldest and largest of the Claremont Colleges. We were founded in 1887 with an idea to bring a liberal arts education to the West Coast. There was this idea of wanting to expand the colleges, which is how the Claremont Colleges came to be. But Pomona is kind of the jack of all trades, if you will. As you'll see throughout this presentation, every other college founded after Pomona was founded in conjunction with Pomona. So they were able to have a much more niche approach to the education. At Pomona, we do have a breadth of study requirement where we ask all of our students to get a breadth of understanding in the academy, but we also want our students to get a depth of understanding inside of their major. We want students to be excited about learning. The state motto for the state of California is Eureka, I found it. So we're always pushing students to see Pomona as an intellectual playground, to be in search of that Eureka moment, and to see the world as a classroom, and to know that their intellectual curiosities can go into our internships program known as PSIP, which can be fully funded by the college, through our SERP program, which stands for Summer Undergraduate Research Program. and go out and do research. And knowing that when you come to Pomona, you will be expected in most of our majors to complete a senior thesis or senior project to kind of be the culmination of who you are as a young person. Pomona definitely wants our students to understand that access and equity and diversity is one of the most important things on our campus. And oh, there's my time. Okay, and I will pass it on.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Jessica Johnston. I use she, her pronouns. I'm Associate Director of Admission at Scripps. So I want to highlight a couple of things that make us a bit different from our neighbors. First off is our signature academic program, which is called the Core Curriculum in Interdisciplinary Humanities. This is a 3-course sequence that all Scripps students do and only Scripps students do. So you would not have students from the other Claremont colleges in these courses. So I'll just highlight the first course in the sequence. It's called Core 1. It's taught to the entire first year class all at one time. There's always an overarching theme to Core 1. Right now that theme is truth. And each week the lecture is given by a different professor from a different department. So this is where you're getting an interdisciplinary look all at one big idea. Secondly, we are a women's college. Definitely makes us different from most colleges in the US. And I do want to say that, your day-to-day life at a women's college is not dramatically different than at any other small liberal arts college. A lot of the principles are the same, but there are some things that we think about a little bit differently, like our faculty teaching in a way that's conducive to the way in which women learn, or thinking about implicit bias as it relates to gender in the classroom. And really what we're all about is the empowerment and success of women. We are about lifting up and centering the voices of women, which makes for a rather unique kind of sense of community on campus. We're happy to answer any other questions that you have about us being a women's college or anything about Scripps, and I will kick it over to Yaneli at Claremont McKenna College.
Thank you, Jessica. All right, let's jump off here. I firmly believe that to begin to understand what distinguishes CMC, you first have to know our history, because our history has informed and shaped our mission and our offerings. So very quickly, 1946, end of World War II, young men and women who served for our country, having been out in the real world, have real world experiences, coming back home in search of an institution to pursue their undergraduate studies. Well, that very same year, our college opened its doors. Our founding fathers genuinely believed that it was our mission to educate students to be thoughtful, productive, and responsible leaders in whatever profession they wish to pursue. And in order to execute this mission, it was critical that we merge 2 worlds together: the world of events, real world and practice and experience, with the world of education, learning, discussion, and research. Bottom line, we learn for the sake of doing here at CMC. We encourage our students to take the insights from their debate discussions in the classroom, take the discoveries from their research, and apply it to the real world to address challenges they know exist within their communities, to move the needle forward, to create change, and positive change at that. And maybe that's in the field of education, maybe it's in politics, journalism, accounting, finance, and medicine. The way that we do it, we give our students the opportunity to pursue research, graduate level research at 11 different research centers on campus. Every student has the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. or Silicon Valley, have a full-time internship while studying with an undergraduate CMC professor, and the opportunity to join us for our Athenaeum speaker series every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Wednesday and Thursday, to have an opportunity to have dinner with a speaker and then join in a conversation about what their education actually transformed into in the real world. So that's a little bit about CMC. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my colleague at Harvey Mudd now.
Hello, so good to see everyone again. Roberto Peña, I'm at Harvey Mudd College. The gist of Harvey Mudd, we are a STEM-focused school of the 5 colleges. We only have 10 majors on our campus. We require that you go through a common core, which is composed of practically a class in every one of our majors. You'll be taking these classes in your first 3 semesters. You'll also be taking classes in the humanities, social science, and the arts. Ultimately, what you should know about Harvey Mudd is our mission statement. We're ultimately trying to help you understand STEM in a really great way, but also help you understand STEM, how it impacts the world around you, right? How does the science that you're using, the research that you're doing, how is it impacting the folk around you, and how are you translating that in terms for people to understand? In addition to that, right, you can take advantage of research. All of our undergraduate students will do research. There's summer research opportunities, and there's year-long research opportunities as well. You do a capstone project your senior year, which can either be a clinic project. You partner with corporations across the Southern California and across the country to come up with solutions for them, or you can have all your original research. You could do it at Harvey Mudd specifically, right? We are a community-based school, right? So we live on campus. Our students love being around each other. I say that you get to be around about 900 nerds, right? You get to hang out with students who can geek out with you about science and non-science stuff at the same time. So I will pass it along to Santiago at Pitzer.
Hi, everyone. My name is Santiago Ibarra, and I'm representing Pitzer. Pitzer is the youngest of the Claremont Colleges. We were formed in 1963, same year as the March on Washington. So while we had some academic leanings at the beginning, and we were actually single sex, we started off as a women's college, we quickly pivoted to a set of core values. I can't get through all 5 in the time I have. The ones I really want to focus on are social justice. This actually has a graduation requirement. Students are expected to take a social justice theory course and a praxis so that you are taking action about social issues in Southern California or wherever you're from. Intercultural understanding, so study abroad, is definitely big for us. More than half of our students do that, and we operate 8 of our own programs. But we also really mean it on a very local level, get out into the community around Claremont that maybe isn't a college-going community. One of our newest initiatives is an Inside Out program with the other Claremont colleges. So we're actually going to have some students who are taking our courses while incarcerated who are graduating in December with a Bachelor of Arts from Pitzer. Sustainability, you're going to see a lot more cacti and succulents on our campus because that's really where we should be in Southern California. And student engagement. Students sit on every governing body of the college, so they really help push us and make us very progressive. The admission office actually wanted to be test blind, and we didn't get to make that decision. We had to go through students for them to verify that. So that's a little bit about who we are. But I think we want to go back and talk a little bit about the application process. So Duan, can I get the next slide? Common question for the Claremont colleges. You do have to apply to us separately. We do not share any information across the colleges. So if you're applying to Pitzer and to Scripps, we won't know that at all. It's pretty rare for somebody to apply to all 5, but 1 or 2 often does make sense for some students. We all use the common application. I'm sure you're going to become very familiar with this application. And a few of us use additional applications as well. We all have a holistic review in our process. What that really means is that we're reading things cover to cover. So if we're asking for a document, we really want to utilize it. You're not going to be viewed only by your transcript or test scores. We're all testing optional right now, so test scores may not even be included at all. Recommendations will matter, your essays. It really just means that you should think very thoroughly about all the pieces that you're submitting and how you will present cover to cover. We all meet 100% of demonstrated need when it comes to financial aid. Little differences when it comes to merit scholarships, but just know that the bottom line for all of us is that we want to make this an affordable place for you and your family. So we will be taking need into consideration and make sure that we cover everything that your family cannot. We all do have early decision processes, maybe slight variation in dates, mostly November for early decision 1 and January for early decision 2. These are binding processes. So if you're applying through early decision, you're making that commitment that if you get in, you are coming to our college. If you are applying for financial aid, please note, if for some reason our version of demonstrated need doesn't actually line up with what your version of demonstrated need is, we would release you from those agreements. So have comfort if this is your #1 choice to apply to any one of us along the early decision route. So just briefly, Pomona does take a couple of other applications, the Coalition application and the QuestBridge application. So multiple routes for you to find your way into Pomona's funnel. They offer alumni interviews as an option. Quick note, when any of us say optional, like test optional or interview optional, we really mean it. If this is not something that you should do as a way to feel like we're gaining more interest from you. You know, interviews are great for those who interview well, not so great for those who don't. So don't feel the obligation to join in on anything that we label optional. Pomona does not track demonstrated interest. I'll get to that point a little bit later. Scripps uses the QuestBridge application, also optional for interviews, and do not measure demonstrated interest. Claremont McKenna is coalition and QuestBridge as well. Interviews highly recommended. So obviously, you know, a little bit different than optional. So really think about that, not only for our colleges, but any colleges as you start these processes. Claremont McKenna does not measure demonstrated interest. Harvey Mudd is the coalition app and the common app, optional for interviews and does not measure demonstrated interest. Pitzer, interviews are optional. We have them with our counselors, our current admission fellows who are seniors at Pitzer, and we do track demonstrated interest. That many ways to define that, but basically we are really looking for you to have kicked the tires and gotten to know us very well, so that when you get to our application, you can really express why we're a school that you're interested in. I will say this the same about all the Claremont colleges. I think Jessica pointed out, we're all just different enough that you shouldn't just recycle your application to all 5 of us. I don't think that's a good strategy in that process. So with that, I think I'll go ahead and move it along to the next slide.
Thank you, Santiago. All right, I'm gonna jump back in here, everyone. I just wanna begin with the very first word that you see there, breathe. Okay, along with my colleagues here, we understand what an incredibly challenging this year this has been on so many different fronts. And we just shared a lot of information very quickly. So we are, sharing this session not to overwhelm you, but to provide at least some insight. But before we jump into anything further, we just want you to take a second to breathe. Some of you are nearing, well, I hope all of you for that matter, are nearing the end of the school year. Maybe some of you have already ended the school year, and summer, regardless, summer is around the corner. It is very important and critical that you take care of yourselves. And so what we will share today can wait a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. When your summer starts, take care of yourself. Do what brings joy into your life, whether that's a book that you've been wanting to read, or a hike that you've been wanting to take, or truthfully just binging on a Netflix or Hulu, whatever platform you use, a show you've been really hoping to see. So really important, take care of yourself. Secondly, take time to really reflect on what you've accomplished throughout this year. Academically, personal growth, whatever it may be for you, it's just super important that you take the time to reflect and celebrate yourself for those accomplishments. When you are ready to begin this college process, and I know maybe some of you have already started having a couple of conversations with faculty or staff at your school, some of you may not. You're not late to the party, if you will. We could honestly spend a whole other hour talking about building your college list. There's so many different elements to take into consideration: the location, the size, whether the school actually offers a particular program that you are interested in. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and share a search engine that's actually free, provided by the College Board. Let me go ahead, if I could send it here, which actually can help you narrow down some of these elements that you are looking for, factors. You can select them in that search engine, and then little by little, you can actually get results as to what colleges or universities might be institutions that you could take a look at. And that's where then you can jump into registering for information sessions, other events that one of my colleagues will touch on a little bit later. So just wanted to share that important resource with you. I think it can be helpful. And Duan will head on over to the next slide. Okay, so a very important topic, extracurricular activities engagement, right? So In discussing this year, like I said, it was remarkably challenging. I want to emphasize a couple of things before I share my tidbits of wisdom here, my nuggets of wisdom. We understand and we empathize that there were many, if not all, activities, organizations that came to a halt, if you will, or that were unable to proceed because of the pandemic. A lot of these events, organizations take place in person, and while some of them may have moved on to a virtual platform with Zoom, it may not have been the same, right? And so we need you to know that in our holistic admission review process that Santiago touched on just a minute ago, that we will take all of that into context when evaluating your application in that holistic review process, okay? And additionally, it's also very important to recognize that when it comes to work and family responsibilities, those absolutely count as extracurricular activities, as engagement that is taking place beyond the classroom, okay? So there's two very important notes to share. Now, I want to talk about the importance of the why, the what, and the how. The how. The why is, I'd like for you at some point this summer, I'd recommend that you jot down, first and foremost, all of the activities, the clubs, the internships, the volunteer opportunities, the family responsibilities that you have been a part of since your freshman year, or in particular, this last year. And I would very much encourage you to think about why. Why have I been a part of X, Y, and Z? What's my reason behind that? It's I think, a very deep question to ask students. And I want you to really, I hope that you're jotting this down, because that why is actually going to come back in about a minute from now. So very important, jot down your activities, jot down why you've been a part of those, and what. Looking ahead, what is it that I can do to make a positive impact, to contribute to these communities, organizations, service clubs that I'm a part of, sports, family responsibilities? What can I do to move the needle forward, to continue to make positive change for others that will come after me? What can that look like? Even if it's still in a virtual setting, or if you have the opportunity to return back to campus in the fall, what are your goals? What are your objectives? What can you do? What are you hoping to do? And the how is there anything that you can prepare in advance this summer to kind of start setting those stones towards that pathway of moving the needle forward? So not a huge task, but it's super important to start thinking about those particular elements when it comes to your extracurricular activities and your engagement. And why is this important or relevant, at least through the admission process? Joanna, if you could help me with the next slide, please. I think another critical element for some institutions, not for all, but for some, is the interview stage for your college application process. And I want to be very clear before I proceed that what Santiago said earlier is absolutely true. Interviews may not be required at some schools, and they may be required at others. They may be optional at some schools, and they may be like highly highly recommended. So it's very important to also keep an eye out, and a quick Google search can do this if you go ahead and have a college in mind already and just say, does Claremont McKenna College offer interviews? And then you could find out, when and where. But what is an interview? That's a great question. An interview is essentially a structured conversation where one participant asks a question and another one provides a response. And the purpose of the interview could be multifold. On one front, it could give the admission office an opportunity, a genuine opportunity to learn more about you in a one-on-one setting. It could also give you the opportunity to learn more about the institutions because you have an admission officer, an admission representative, a current standing senior that can provide insight into the community life, academic, social, whatever it may be. we usually get asked, should I do an interview? And that's truly going to depend on whether or not the college actually offers it. And then at that point, obviously it's at your discretion. If it's obviously required, then you definitely want to complete that element. But if it's optional, my nugget of wisdom is if it's optional, and especially if it's highly recommended, definitely sign up for an interview, okay? But bottom line, different at every college. So, Duandan, please. Here are a couple of things to think about, okay? If you do decide to sign up for an interview, who would be interviewing you? Typically an admission officer, a current student, perhaps who's a senior or maybe a junior, or an alumni interviewer, so someone who's graduated who is still working very closely with the admission office. What? An interview may be evaluative, or it may simply be informational. And that's also a very important distinction to make. Evaluative means that your admission officer, current student, or alumni interviewer is actually going to be jotting down notes, and those notes would be shared with the admissions office committee, right? When it's informational, it really is meant to be more of conversation and opportunity for you to have your questions answered and for them to really get to know you a bit more. But usually there is no, and I think it can be safely said, there's no evaluative form that is being submitted, right? When should you apply? I think, again, this is super critical for you to know that it's going to depend on each institution. Some institutions, case in point, Claremont McKenna, we ask students to interview before the actual deadline by which the student is applying to. And so they have to be really attentive to making sure that they are completing them ahead of time. For others, it can be, something you do after you submit your application. So very important to also look up or to simply send your admission officer an email, and that's something that they can quickly respond to. But the nugget of wisdom, make sure that you look at the deadlines. Oh yes, because they can fill up very, very fast. Where? Well, very simple. Many of our institutions are still going to continue with offering remote Zoom interviews. I don't believe that any of us here are actually going to be offering in-person interviews. I may be wrong, and certainly my colleagues can share in the chat if that will take place, but I know I can share for CMC that while we certainly say that they're highly recommended, we will be offering a number of online interviews throughout this entire summer up until the fall. And then the why. I emphasized this in my last slide as well. While it can help you learn more about the school, it can give the admission office an opportunity to learn more about you as well. But to my point earlier, and this is what I will end on, the why. The why am I jotting down activities that I've been a part of, organizations? Because in the interviews, whatever question we're asking you, the real question that's being asked is why. So when we ask you, for example, tell me a little bit about the activities, 2 or 3 activities that you've been a part of, we're really asking, we can see that in your application. So tell us why they are important to you and what your goals are, or like what you've accomplished and contributed to that, right? The same thing with, tell me a little bit about your favorite class, or tell me about, your interest in CMC. Why is that the case? And so understanding and knowing why you are doing the things that you are doing can be very beneficial in the interview process. Thank you.
All right, the personal statement, which is probably something that you will all get the most nervous about, because it's the only thing that you still have control over, right? Your transcript is pretty much set. Your activities are pretty much set. And this is really your time to introduce yourself to us. The first thing I want to say is that you shouldn't get nervous about it. This should be something that you're really sharing who you are, who you want to be in college. It's kind of an opportunity not only to present yourself to the reader myself being a reader, all of us are application readers, but also to the school and what you might be able to contribute to that college. This is sort of the matching process, right? That you're not only going to thrive at our institutions, but you're going to make us better and that you're going to be happy here. That's really the point of these applications and why we review them. This is not in any sense an academic essay. I always say to students that this should be reading as a conversation, right? If I need to break out a thesaurus or a dictionary to figure out what you're saying, that's not a strong essay. I really want it to flow. I want to read it from the beginning to end, just pretty quickly to get a snapshot of who you are. Do not feel like you need this to be a unique topic. Every panel I've done in the pandemic, students are like, how do I stand out in the essay? You don't need to stand out. Standing out may not be a good thing. Like I may remember it for not good reasons. And I've been doing this job for a long time. It's really hard to come up with something that is going to be new to me. So I've kind of stopped, not that I ever looked back, I stopped thinking about that and just really trying to figure out who you are as a person. That's really the only thing that makes it unique, that it's you and not you trying to be somebody. It is called a personal statement for a reason. Second bullet point here is it's about you. Yes, many failed opportunities when I call it the tribute essay, when you write about your grandmother. As important as that person might be in your life and as amazing as they might be in your life, we're not admitting your grandmother, right? So even if your grandmother is an influence, you really want to make sure that the core of the essay is really back to you and who you are. You're probably going to want to rewrite this many times. The secret of the college essay is that while I read it fully, when I present it to our committee, when we get into those last minute conversations about who's voting admit, I summarize it in 1 or 2 sentences. So when you share this essay with a mentor or a friend, ask them to summarize it in 1 or 2 sentences. And if that's not really the point that you were going for, if that's not the summary that you wanted, really rethink about how to highlight those things in that essay. So that is the sort of the personal statement. That's one that I think you're going to share with all colleges. Very few people sort of write multiple personal statements for different colleges. And that's fair. You know, we're not looking for you to be exactly Pitzer or Scripps or Claremont McKenna in that personal statement, but we all do require a supplemental essay. And that really is where you want to make sure that you're not recycling this essay. I think the Claremont Colleges are a tremendously good example of how colleges can really differ, even though we're all small liberal arts colleges. You know, I talked about our core values, so talking about sustainability or social justice is going to be very big. Claremont McKenna emphasizes leadership. So that's a different essay altogether, right? That we're kind of looking for. And this is going to be true across the board for all colleges and universities. It does mean more work for you, more research to figure out why you're applying to those institutions. But I think you should really think about it that way, that we're not just looking for generic small liberal arts students. We're looking for students who are going to thrive within our own missions and values. So that's really the point of the essay. I will say when you look at all of our prompts or prompts from other universities, it is a signal to you about what we're looking for. As I said, we focus a lot on the core values in these essays. University of Chicago is famous for always having a really quirky question. And I think that signals to you, they want you to have fun in this essay, right? They're giving you an example of who they are so that you can follow suit with who you are. I think the other things, tips about these essays is make sure you're trying to teach us something, right? I remember a long time ago, I read an essay from a Haitian student from Florida, and he was like the only male in his family, and sort of how gender plays a role in Haitian immigrant families. And I had no clue, right? I'm not from Florida, I'm not Haitian. And it was just really fascinating to know. And when I can picture like, oh, okay, that you can come into a community, share who you are, and thereby teaching the community something and helping that community grow, that's a really good essay. That's a really good example of who you are in that community, in that classroom, and how you can help others to learn. So that would probably be my big takeaway from the essay. But yeah, relax, have fun with it, not academic, let it flow. And I think that's all I'll say for the personal statement.
Right, and thank you, Santiago, for all that insight. Someone who's been in the field for as long as you have. I'm sure you've seen a lot of essays, and we appreciate the advice you've given us. So next, I've seen a lot of questions about letters of recommendation, so this is why I've hesitated to answer some of those. So I'm happy to address that here. As you know, letters of recommendation are helpful to get a sense of what you're like in the classroom, and we completely understand that this past year has been different, right? We've all been in this virtual format in these little squares, our computers, and our teachers or professors are observing us as best as they can. And you still have control over what you have control over, which is your work. But I'm sure teachers will try their best to, highlight you in a positive way, right? And this is one of the things we ask you is to use this time to think about which teachers to ask, right? It doesn't have to be a class where you got a perfect grade. Sometimes maybe you got a B or, a grade that you're not super happy about, but you work really hard at that class, right? And that shows a lot about your grit, your kind of like how hard you work. Those are all very positive things to see in a letter of recommendation, right? Think about the teachers that you've connected with. Maybe there's teachers that really inspired you to keep learning a certain subject, right? Maybe there's professors that are so passionate about the subjects that they teach, and you connected with them on that level that you find yourself learning about those subjects outside of those classrooms, right? So there's definitely different ways for you to kind of ask for these letters of recommendations, but think about the requirements that each college has. So we all have different requirements. So for example, Harvey Mudd College, we require one letter of recommendation from a STEM teacher and a letter of recommendation from a humanities, social science, and arts teacher, right? We, not much specifically, but we usually recommend that you do it from 10th grade and up, right? So teachers that you've connected with in the past couple of years. And then usually an academic course subject. Because again, we like Santiago mentioned about the essays being the only thing in control. You don't necessarily have as much control over this except choosing who will write for you. And again, most, if not all, teachers will write in a positive light for you, will put their best foot forward for you and paint you in a light that, ultimately these letters of recommendation, we're using them to learn who you are as a community member, because we are all small schools, right? And we are inviting you as a community member to our colleges to be around community members that, are interested in a broad range of things, interested in a broad range of subjects. So these letters of recommendation are an additional tool for us to get to know who you are as a person inside and sometimes outside of the classroom, depending on the letter of recommendation. So I think that's all the snippets that I have. If you want to turn over to financial aid.
Yes, and financial aid is probably one of the most anxiety-inducing parts of the application, because when you look at our institutions, you see this sticker price of a whole lot of money, and you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to afford that? At Pomona, at all of the Claremont colleges, we meet 100% of demonstrated financial need. So whatever your family can afford to pay based off of the CSS profile and the FAFSA is what they'll be expected to pay. There are some institutions that are part of the Claremont colleges that do offer merit aid, which can help offset some of those costs that you see that the need-based aid does not meet. It's really, really, really important for you to start thinking about having that conversation with your parents to kind of get those ducks in a row, so that when you hit apply to our different institutions in the academic sense, you can also apply in the financial aid sense. And I think a really great way to kind of see what the need would be offered is to go through our My Intuition or net price calculator. Each one of our institutions have My Intuition, so you can go to our website and you can find it, and it's I think it's like 6 questions and you fill it out. So it's super quick, super easy. The net price calculator is a little bit more detailed, but it gives you a more accurate number of what you can expect to receive from our different institutions when it comes to grant money for our financial aid packages. Some of our institutions package loans in our financial aid packages. Some of our institutions don't package any loans. And so having those different kinds of conversations with your financial aid officer from the institution that you're looking at to kind of understand that is going to help you better understand what your family can expect. You're also going to see that a lot of our institutions are working to, I guess, understand and support the middle class when it comes to financial aid, because we do meet 100% of need. We see students that are full need and then our students that are full pay. So making sure that you're having conversations with the different institutions to understand and support that middle income families is really important as well. And last but certainly not least, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Jessica so that she can talk about all of the really cool ways that you can learn more about our institution. Ooh, Dwan. Where is it? There we go. Okay.
We are. All right. Okay. So once again, lots of information just came your way and you may be thinking, how do I figure all of this out? Where do I even begin? And so the great thing is we are living in a golden age of learning about colleges, whether it's in-person options or tons and tons of virtual options. So now as you're kind of standing on the precipice of summer, there are lots of ways that you can learn about our colleges and the other 2,000 odd colleges that are around the country so that you can start to narrow down your list. So first off, keep doing what you're doing. Keep coming to events like this, whether it's put on by multiple schools like this, so you can see lots of schools all at once, or if we're putting on solo events, definitely come and check out whatever it is that we've got going on. You can find stuff like this on our websites. That's a great place to start, whether we're doing in-person visits, which some of us may have that information already up on our websites. Others of us may be still working out the details on that. Check back on the website in the next few weeks. And then also all of these virtual opportunities like virtual interviews, virtual info sessions that you can do from the comfort of your couch. And then other ways that you can learn about us, you can join our mailing lists, you can reach out to our current students to learn more about the actual lived experience on our campuses. You can follow us on social media, check out our YouTube channels. I know I just uploaded a new thing to YouTube today, so we're always adding new stuff. And there are also some additional resources beyond colleges. So Yaneli was talking earlier about Big Future. She posted that link in the chat earlier. There's also stuff like College Board and Niche, lots of great ways for you to learn about colleges that you've never even heard of. And be adventurous, go learn about things that you've never even heard of. Think about a state that you've never thought that you might want to live in. This is a great time to do that exploring and figure out what it is that you might be interested in. And then don't forget to actually keep track of all this information. You may find as you go through the summer that everything starts to blend together a little bit in your brain. And a lot of colleges will sound kind of similar in our sales pitch. So, so come up with some way to take notes or keep track of what it is that you learn about each of the colleges and what's important to you. I know when I was in your shoes and I was looking at colleges, I had a blue notebook that I took to every information session that I did. And that was my one place where I had all my notes, and it was called the Blue Book of College Knowledge. So find a way to keep track of all of your college knowledge, and this whole process will start to become a little bit easier. If you do this research and your homework now over the summer, when you get to applying, that'll be easier for all those why do you want to go to our college essays, and then it hopefully will make your final decision in the spring that much easier as well. With that, I believe we're moving into our Q&A.
Okay, some questions that we've gotten thus far. Even though Roberto did an incredible job of talking about letters of recommendation, there were some specific questions about letters of recommendation that we saw, saying that if you're a STEM student and you're planning on majoring in STEM, does it need to come from a STEM teacher? Again, reiterating what Roberto was saying, we want teachers that know you the best. So please, please, please go to teachers that know you really well. We also want to know who you are as an academic in the last couple of years. And yes, you may have an incredible relationship with your English teacher who is now the debate captain, or excuse me, debate advisor, and you're the debate captain, but who you were in 9th grade versus who you are in 11th and 12th grade is very, very different. So we want to see who you are as an academic now. So it's definitely recommended that students come on and get their letters of recommendation coming from teachers in their 11th and 12th grade year.
I'm also seeing lots of new recommendation questions about like what kind of content should be in these letters, or what's the purpose of these. And really a teacher recommendation letter is to help us get a sense of what you're like as a scholar in the classroom. This is why it's important that it's somebody who knows you. And really everything in the application is there so we can predict what you're going to be like once you get to our community. So this is a big part of it, especially since we have such small classes that are discussion based. We want to know what you're like now, what areas where may you grow in our classrooms. And so that's what's helpful to us. So if you are somebody who actually writes recommendation letters, and I believe there's some of you in the audience today, what's helpful to us is not necessarily a list of the students' extracurricular activities, but because, we see that elsewhere, but a little bit more about what they're like in the classroom. What's their impact been? How are they with their peers? That kind of stuff helps us determine what kind of helps us picture our students in our classrooms and in our community more broadly. So hopefully that is also helpful to people. I saw something also asking about, if my principal writes me a letter or my supervisor or something like that. All of those would be additional letters of recommendation. We're generally going to want recommendation letters from your school counselor and your teachers who have actually taught you in an academic class. But anything outside of that, every college is going to have different policies on additional anything, recommendation letters, resumes, whatever. So be sure to, before you send in anything additional, check with the college to make sure that they actually want to receive that. And do keep in mind that we'll read everything that you send us. So please be kind to our eyeballs and don't go crazy and send us tons and tons of letters. If you're thinking about adding something to your application, make sure we're going to learn something new about you from that.
Absolutely. And I also want to say the kind of like elephant in the room, like we are still very much in the pandemic. And so we are still going to be offering a ton of grace when it comes to letters of recommendation from distance learning, lack of activities, like make sure that that we also are very much still living in this pandemic and recognizing that it's a very chaotic, hectic world for people. And so just because people are getting vaccinated and the world is starting to open up, that does not negate the grace that we had for our incoming first years. It absolutely will be extended for as long as distance learning is affecting even a single student in our applicant pool.
I'm also seeing here a question, since we're on the topic of recommendations, and now that we're talking about it, we're getting more questions about it, about the difference between a counselor and a teacher recommendation. And this kind of depends on the student. So sometimes they'll look kind of similar in terms of their content. And especially if maybe you go to a big school and you don't really know your counselor and you don't really know your teachers, they might be a little bit more generic, and that's totally fine. We never ding you for that. It's not your fault that you're in a class of 40 students in your AP US history class and it's hard to get to know your teacher. We understand that. One thing that can make a counselor letter different in particular is if you've had some sort of circumstance in your high school education that would be helpful context for us to know. So like maybe you got a concussion in 10th grade And so you took a lot of classes pass fail for one semester. And then we see that, the next semester you were kind of back to your normal level of rigor and performance. That helps explain that, like, what happened during that one semester in 10th grade. So sometimes they'll explain any sort of like anomaly in your journey as well. So that's something that I can differentiate those two, and why we ask for both counselor letters and teacher letters.
I also saw some questions about the social aspect and the co-curricular activities that come through each one of our institutions. I can say that if you were to talk to any graduating senior at any one of the Claremont colleges, if there was ever a semester where one, they did not take a class on another college campus, or two, did not have another college student in one of their classes, and on top of that, get involved in an activity or club or organization that was just for their campus, you would be hard pressed to do so, because we are very, very intertwined in that capacity. And I just saw that Santiago came on screen, and so I'm gonna turn it over if you wanted to talk about that, but I also want to give you some screen time.
Well, I am an alum of Pomona College, so I definitely understand the Claremont system, even though I work at Pitzer now. Yeah, half of my friends were from the other colleges by the time I graduated, because there's a lot of shared clubs and activities. Like I was on the ballroom dance team, and I think there were probably more Mudd students on ballroom dance than there were Pomona students. So I got to know a lot of those individuals. On the Loose, it's sort of our outdoor excursion group is 5 College. So I got to go to Death Valley and meet students from all the 5 colleges. I definitely took a class at Scripps because they were offering child development, and no other college was offering that in that year. So it's like I needed to go to Scripps to do that. I took a class at Pitzer. So yeah, we're very different. Like, you're not going to go out into the world and say, I went to the Claremont Colleges, right? You're gonna be like, I went to Pitzer, I went to Claremont McKenna. It's a different experience, but the opportunities are all shared. Those will be exactly the same across the board, and allows us to be more unique. Like, I don't think Pitzer could be Pitzer without the other 4 colleges, because, we just define ourselves in different ways and know that we don't have to cover what Pomona covers. We don't have to cover what Scripps does, because they do it so well. So, we go our own route. And that I think is the Claremont experience, but you certainly identify with one college.
Jessica, since you're on screen, there was a question about the dorms and the residential life at Scripps. Do you mind talking about that?
Sure, yes. So I am not a graduate of Scripps, but I am very envious of the residence halls. They're so nice. Many of the rooms even have sinks in them, which may not sound that exciting right now, but believe me, when you get to college, if you don't have a sink in your dorm room, you will also envy Scripps students the residential experience. So yes, we generally speaking, our first year students are always living on campus. The residential piece for all of our campuses is super important. This is why you come to a small liberal arts college. Your education doesn't end when you set foot outside of the classroom. And for Scripps in particular, we have a kind of a cool program where we have in the residence hall student community coordinators. So at some schools you may have heard about, resident advisors or RAs, and they live in the dorms. They're older students usually, and they plan all sorts of programming, and they're also kind of enforcing the rules and that sort of stuff, dealing with conflict resolution and all of that. And a few years ago at Scripps, we decided to kind of make that 2 separate things. So the community coordinators are purely for fun and building community within the residence halls, which I think is something that has really had an impact on life on campus at Scripps. We're all small colleges, so you have the opportunity to get to know people, but sometimes it's just easier when there are events that are facilitated for you. I would say in general at all of the Claremont colleges, the quality of life is very high. These are all great places with great food and beautiful workout facilities and all that kind of stuff that you think of for your day-to-day life is pretty nice.
There was a question about diversity and inclusion, which I think all of us can chime in. I'm going to actually start on an academic side because we actually have the second oldest Chicano Latino studies program in the country. It's a shared major by all 5 institutions. And certainly for me, being first generation, being Latino, it was amazing to see myself represented in the curriculum and to like take Psych of the Chicano or to take classes on decolonization. Made me feel very much included and seen on top of all the social things that exist. So I'm just going to stop at the academic section.
I can talk about how it's important for all of us in terms of supporting these students. Each one of these institutions as a place to make it more accessible, meet 100% of need. That was a very intentional choice. Having an opportunity for our students to be supported by our larger shared resources like the Office for Black Student Affairs, the office, well, it's not the office, it's the Chicano Latino Student Affairs, Asian American Resource Center, the QRC, which stands for the Queer Resource Center, Monsoor, and our Psychological Health Center. So we have really robust programs and support that come from that because we all support these institutions. And so there are full-time staff and larger full-time staff than you'll find at other small liberal arts colleges because we all are encouraging and pushing our institutions to support those communities and support those different identities and understand the intersectionality of all of these different identities that our campuses and students may find themselves a part of.